Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Scared Soldier back with another Borderlands 3 video. And in today's video, we are going to be addressing some of the concerns and comments with one of my recent videos ranking the Vault Hunters. And it is between Moze and Flak. I had a lot of people kind of going over Flak and claiming, he's better than Moze, yada yada yada. So I wanted to compare the two characters by themselves and go over a couple things. So in this video, keep in mind, this is, again, most of my opinion. Also, you guys are going to see for yourself, side by side, what these characters are about. Keep in mind, all the characters in the game, at the end of the day, all have different playstyles. Moze is not the same as Flak, but we can compare in just how they handle situations better or maybe worse. So that is what we're going to be looking at, and also going to be diving into some of their skill trees. So let's get into the video, guys. So what we're going to do first is look at both of the characters' skill trees in depth. And the main topic I want to cover is, again, the survivability first, and then we will go to other parts of the characters and then finally make a conclusion on which character is better. And hopefully you guys will get a better idea of what I was trying to say in my last video. So with that being said, we're in Moze's skill tree first, and first thing, well, actually we're not in her skill tree directly, we're actually in her inventory. So the first thing for class mods. So class mods, Moze has one main really good one for survivability, just like specifically for survivability, which is called the Sapper. Now the Sapper provides you with 12% health steal. The longer you shoot, so the longer you shoot, you can get up to 12% health steal, and that's pretty much it. You don't get any extra damage or anything like that. But it is one of her class mods for survivability, since we're on the topic of that. Now, if we go to the skill tree real quick as well, what I want to point out is just overall how complete her skill trees are in regards to they're all usable. All of her capstones are actually very, very good. You can go into any tree and spec into all her capstones and have a good amount of time. You can make many different various types of builds as well. And also there's a lot of good perks in her skill trees for the most part. Again, you see I have one build going and I'm spec quite heavily into the green tree and the blue tree. And if I want to make a deathless build, I can go into the red tree and spec a lot of points into here as well. Now, that's a really, really cool thing I like about Moze, is because compared to some of the other characters, she can use all of her skill trees, capstones, and they're actually quite effective. Now, the one downfall of Moze, real quickly, is her action skill. It's quite boring, since Iron Bear for the majority of Borderlands has really been underperforming. It's really unfortunate, and also the fact that you only get one action skill is quite unfair. Most characters in the game have 3 types of action skills. Moze only has Iron Bear. They should definitely give Moze different variations of Iron Bear, such as like a flying one, maybe a faster one, and maybe more of a stronger, tankier version or whatever. And overall, her augments on her actual Iron Bear are quite underwhelming. Again, the Iron Bear doesn't do a lot of damage, so most of her augments are quite garbage. And then also the majority of most players, they like to go with target softening to weaken enemies and vanquish rocket pod, which doesn't give you a lot of viability, which is kind of unfortunate. So her action skill for the most part is not amazing just yet. But lastly, Iron Bear, his main priority right now for us is to get in him in terms of dire situations. So again, going back to survivability, if ever Moze is in a hard situation where she's taking a lot of damage, more so than she can actually get back, it is a very good idea to hop into Iron Bear to get out of that situation, allow your shield to start regenerating, and then you can come out of Iron Bear, or if Iron Bear gets killed really quickly, at least you'll have some sort of regeneration of your shield. Now, back to obviously some more survivability. Redistribution gives you health regeneration up to 5%. We also get some weapon damage, and you might be saying, well, weapon damage doesn't give you survivability. Yes, the harder you can hit with your characters, that means you're killing enemies at a really high rate, which means less enemies around you, which means less damage taken overall. And the reason I point out scrap heat and redistribution is because these perks before didn't offer health regeneration, nor did it offer weapon damage. It's only recently that they increased these perks. And then finally, Russian offensive. This was another one that they buffed. And this one gives you lifesteal of 8%, which is really high, especially on Mayhem 10 with Mayhem 10 weapons. your weapons, basically you do 1 or 2 shots and your health is back to full. The only downside of this is you have to sprint, and sometimes sprinting, if you don't have enough space around you or you're taking a lot of splash damage, can be a little bit difficult to perform at times. But again, you can really master this and get a lot of benefits from this as well, but at least it is another option of survivability. Now, the main thing I want to point out, aside from Vampire, which is just a custom way of keeping yourself alive by throwing grenades, with Moze, that's another way of survivability, is also Tor Cross Promotion, because this one also got buffed. This one gives you now splash damage and a lot of it, and splash damage, again, kind of like damage overall, is great in terms of crowd controlling and dealing with multiple groups of enemies to keep yourself alive, which is very, very important. And that is what Moze does best, and I find she does better than FL4K overall, is she can deal with mobs a lot more effectively than FL4K. But with that out the way, let's go over and go see what FL4K is working with. But actually, sorry, one more point is that with the Shield of Retribution, another way of survivability is having an insanely enormous shield with Moze. Having a major big shield and the capabilities of regenerating your shield really quickly is one of Moze's really good targets. She can also equip the Bloodletter, and the Bloodletter will transfer all her lifesteal to shield regen, which is insane. So you can also have a really humongous shield with Moze, which is something not any other character in the game can do. So that's another means of survivability in her skill tree. Now let's go ahead and see what FL4K is working with. So we got the Beastmaster himself, and what we're going to do is similar to Moze. We're going to start off with the class mod. Now the class mod is going to be the Red Fang. This is very good because FL4K's pet taunts all enemies, and this is very great and a very common class mod to use with Gamma Burst. But unfortunately, this class mod, very similarly to Moze's survivability class mod, if you will, doesn't provide any other thing than survivability, doesn't give you any damage or anything else. So they're kind of similar on that playing field. Now, unfortunately, when Mayhem 10, a lot of the enemies are quite tanky, and losing damage, unfortunately, is something you have to weigh yourselves if you think it's more important. But I find with Moze, you can actually keep most of your damage pretty much without losing survivability, as opposed to FL4K. You want to be in more of a Gamma Burst build, it seems like, when you want a Red Fang, which is going to give you more survivability. But unfortunately, you're going to take a bit of a hit on when it comes to your damage. So now when you come over to the actual skill tree really quickly, you're going to be seeing that the red tree and the green tree are FL4K's main skill trees to go to. The blue tree is quite underwhelming. It's very directed towards your pet, and that's all fine and dandy if the pet was actually very good, but unfortunately at the moment the pet is not very good. He's really not useful during boss fights, especially things like Wotan, and in the Guardian takedown it's only going to be harder than Wotan, so I can only imagine how fast your pet's going to die. Hopefully, again, they do perfect it and make the pet quite strong and scale like they said they would. And the capstone is completely garbage on the blue tree as well. So most people, what they like to do is just spec a little bit into the blue tree and then move on from there. Unlike Moze, all her skill trees, all her capstones are all viable to use, which is definitely a plus on to Moze's side. Now, when it comes to features of survivability, we talked about Gamma Burst builds already, but let's look at some other features of FL4K's skill trees. So first of all, if you're going to look over here, we have self-repairing system. This is going to give you a slight little bit of health regeneration, which is not a lot at all, to be honest with you. And max health, in my opinion, is overrated. It's honestly not a big deal. I would much prefer lifesteal in this game as opposed to max health. It's not really a big deal. In practice, you guys would note, you'll see the difference in practice. Okay, so the next thing is also the turn tail and run. This again is going to give you a little bit of health regeneration as well, which is okay. But again, like I was saying before, health regeneration is definitely not something to rely on to keep yourself alive, and health steal is a lot better. Now, if you wanted to make your pet definitely stronger, you definitely would spec into my BFFs. But even with that, the pet doesn't provide much else other than maybe taking a bit of aggro off of FL4K during mobbing scenarios. But honestly, I find that the pet could do more, in my opinion, because FL4K, that's his best friend anyways, his pet, and I feel like the pet can be more of a viable option. And again, he's pretty much useless versus bosses. Now, the main perk which is Rage and Recover for Flak's overall survivability, quote unquote, is again another health regeneration perk. Now, you guys might be saying, okay, well, when you put all these health regeneration perks together, that's pretty good, right? Well, again, essentially when you're going to be taking damage, your health is going to be regenerating slowly to full. But if you're doing the takedown and stuff like that, you're going to be constantly taking damage from ads all around. So you're never going to really have full health all the time. You're going to be never out regenerating the amount of damage you're taking, especially on Mayhem 10. That's why lifesteal is 10 times better than just health regeneration alone. Now, when we come over to the actual red tree, which is where a lot of people like for racks for mobbing scenarios, this is going to give you 7% of max health based on damage dealt from your racks, which is really actually the best way of survivability. It kind of acts in a way of health steal, but this I would say is definitely one of Flak's best things to get some health back. Also, you can argue that fade away is also a cool way because you go invisible for a little bit, but most people actually like to use fade away. They don't like to just run away, let themselves regen, and then come back into the battle. What they'll do is they like to shoot while they're in fade away to take advantage of all the damage buffs you get into fade away, and fade away doesn't last very long. Now, yes, you can get fade away back quite quickly, but in a mobbing scenario, again, you guys are taking so much damage all the way around. The minute you are not invisible, you are very vulnerable. Now, lastly, again, this brings me to some certain builds that Flak can run. So now, because you're limited on some of the builds you would run with some of your Flaks, because you're going to be speccing quite heavily into red and green tree, you're going to be for mobbing mostly into the rack section, because racks are a great way and an easy way to proc ASC, and that's going to lead me to Flak's best way of surviving, which is going to come from this anointment right here, and this comes from the cartel event. On action skill start, activate any effect. This is amazing because this can spam stop gaps, so you basically have immunity, infinite amount immunity, or immunity on demand with your racks. Racks are a great way because you can get up to 3 with certain class mods. Maybe you can get an extra one, but most people use Cosmic Stalker, Bounty Hunter, things like that. So you'll have 3 racks, and you can spam immunity as much as you want, which is basically infinite survivability. But that limits you to 1 build and 1 build only, and you're going to only be using racks. Now, a lot of people like to use other things as well, fade away, gamma burst, and you will be just stuck with racks. Some people might be okay with that, but others are not so. Now, with all that being said, let's look at the 2 characters overall, just from what we just saw so far. So Flak's pet overall is not amazing, and Moze's Iron Bear is also not amazing. So we can kind of give and take there, a little bit of push and pull. Some people might veer towards more Flak on that side. Some people might go towards Moze a little more. Nonetheless, both action skills are not very good. In terms of survivability, I find so far Moze has the edge because she does have lifesteal, and lifesteal is much more powerful than just health regeneration alone. Now, although Flak has the ability to go invisible, the invisibility perk does not last very long, especially if you don't spec into gorillas in the mist. You're just going to have 3 shots and then you're very vulnerable. And fade away, in my opinion, is more suited towards bossing rather than mobbing. Although, yes, I've seen tons of videos where people were soloing the takedown with a fade away build. It's not necessarily the go-to build for mobs. It's more going to be the racks. And overall, from a damage perspective, I'm not going to actually talk about it. I'm just going to show you guys who is going to be the better character overall, and you guys are going to make the judgment for yourself. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to Athens, and we're just going to run through it with both characters, and you're going to see what I'm talking about when all this is talked about in practice, because we can talk about it, we can theorize it all we want, but when you actually see the characters in action, that is when you can make your final assessment on who's better. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 2 characters in action. So what we're going to be doing here first is we're going to be playing with Flak, and we're going to be going through Athens a little bit, killing some enemies along the way, and just seeing overall how he handles mobs, how he can keep himself alive, of course, and also we're going to do the same with Moze, and we're going to see who does it more effectively. Now, what we're looking for most importantly is obviously survivability, but also efficiency. So that is what's going to be the clear-cut thing for us. So let's go ahead and go kill some enemies. By the way, quickly guys, I don't want to miss this out. We're going to be using the Frozen Heart Shield with the anointment I talked about a little earlier. We're using a Cosmic Stalker, and we're using the Pearl with a Hunter Seeker. So pretty solid build, honestly, and we're using some of Flak's really awesome weapons. So we're not trying to make him look bad or anything like that. We're trying to be super effective with him right now. So let's go ahead and do so. So damage-wise so far, you guys see he's not lacking. And that's not what we were talking about. Flak is very amazing on damage. You guys can see it yourselves. He's not lacking on damage.
Accelerating.
What we're doing here is also we're using Flak's specialties. By specialty, I mean what Flak his main purpose is, which is doing crits. And also he's really great with snipers as well. So you can see the damage is great. We're keeping ourselves relatively alive, man. We haven't went down once. I mean, our pet is not doing a whole lot really for us right now. I mean, he's kind of moving around. But at least he's there. Alright, let's go throw a couple grenades. Let's get rid of these guys real quick. Alright. Alright, let's pull out the yellow cake now. Show you guys some stuff there. Obviously, the yellow cake is a very universal weapon. And we could just freeze him like that. So, what we learned over there, or not necessarily learned, but I guess some Flak players who are watching this video already know, obviously Flak is very great at proccing the ASC Anointment, like I was showcasing that I can freeze enemies on demand, of course. I can also do the same thing when it comes to the stopgap. I can just do the same thing and call for my immunity. But overall, you guys see I'm doing a lot of damage to the enemies. I'm handling the situation quite well. The one thing that I did want to note was that it was a little more rigorous to have to go through each individual enemy and shoot them. I had to go ahead, personally go to them, shoot them, and do that over and over and over. And overall, I feel like with Moze, I think we can actually clear out the crowds a lot faster, which is going to translate to better crowd control overall. But let's go ahead and see what Moze is all about. Alright, so now we're on to Moze, and a very similar comparison. We want to make this as fair as possible. We're going to be doing the same thing on Athenas, and we're going to be doing some damage with Moze. Now what we're using is a very similar kind of setup. We're using a very, very good build on Moze. I have some of these builds actually on my channel. This is the Unholy Moze build, by the way, so if you guys don't know what it is, definitely go check it out. But we are using some of Moze's main weapons that she's very good with, kind of similar like we did to Flak. She's great with splash damage weapons, so we put a whole bunch of splash damage weapons on her. With Flak, we had snipers on him, and also we had a yellow cake, of course, just to kind of, you know, give a perspective. We're using the Minesweeper, which is one of her most hard-hitting class mods in the game, with all these other things aside with that. So let's go ahead and see what she's all about as well. Already you guys can see that I don't even have to come close to enemies whatsoever.
Here we go.
And I can kill multiple groups of enemies extremely fast. Wow. Like, the explosions are nuts. Yeah, this is insane.
AI.
Wow, okay. Look at the radius. This is like a nuke, dude. Wow. Okay. Very interesting so far. Definitely different characters. The explosion's like a nuke every single time. Alright, so that's it for the enemies here. So that went definitely a lot faster. Now, again, we were using the specialties of each character. Moze, again, she's very good with splash damage. We wanted to use her best ability. And again, Flak is very good with snipers and all that. So overall, I'm not going to compare necessarily the direct damage, because Flak did a lot of damage with the sniper, and obviously Moze does a lot of damage. She's using a yellow cake. A yellow cake is just a very, very good weapon. What I want to point out there, though, was very important, and what I think separates the two characters. Now, Flak is, again, very, very good with damage overall, but he's a very personal character. I think that's more of his playstyle. He's a character who goes invisible, of course, kind of sneak attacks, tries to get the headshot. He's a hunter. He's in the shadows. He's making shots like that. That's more of his playstyle. Moze is more so, I guess, veered to dealing with groups of enemies and all that stuff via her ability to regenerate ammo, the ability to do splash damage. So what I'm trying to say here is that Moze, so far in the comparison for mobbing, she is much more effective because she can clear out enemies way quicker with just her ability and the capacity to deal a lot more radius, dealing more damage to multiple enemies, whether they're close to each other or a bit far from each other. And also she can hit very hard as well as Flak. Now, when it came to survivability, they both did very well. So from a survivability perspective, they're actually quite fairly even. I think Moze can actually survive better in a more crowd control environment, mobbing, because she can deal with groups of enemies easier than Flak. But overall, very, very, very close together. So let's go ahead and see what they can do against certain bosses in the game. So what I want to do here, guys, is show you just how the difference is between the characters. So this is actually a good opportunity to check, because there's a lot of enemies in this region over here. And you see, the most important thing I want you guys to look at is my mini-map. So you're going to look at my mini-map and see the amount of enemies there is in front of me. And look how they all disappear. That is insane, guys. That is the power of Moze, because she has in her skill tree more splash damage. The radius of her splash damage has a chance to double, making it a lot easier to deal with crowds of enemies like you guys are seeing right here. It's absolutely ridiculous how quickly you go through enemies with Moze. Look at that damage right there. Insane. And this area is already clear. So this is going to be the last comparison when it comes to mobbing. I could go to the takedown quickly with some of the characters, but let's kind of go to Flak right now. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to actually have a little fun, and we're going to put on the yellow cake with Flak, just to make it even more fair, just to show you guys a direct comparison of the two characters using the same exact gun. But we're going to see if there is any difference at all in actually the ability to get through this amount of enemies right here real quick, and also just the amount of overall damage we can do. So let's go ahead and do it. Okay, not bad so far. Definitely a little less damage, although this gun is very powerful. That added splash damage that Moze gets is definitely a lot more effective. Okay, let's go. We got a big group just like last time. Can we take them all out? Okay, we got almost all of them off. Again, pay attention to the mini-map as much as you can, guys, because you see all those red dots. Okay. But so far, you guys can already see that that added splash radius that Moze gets with the Tor cross promotion, the ability to double her nuke size, and also that added splash damage really helps dealing with crowds, even with using the same gun. Let's go ahead and go up there and freeze these enemies now, which is something I really like. Oh. It's okay, that's just a barrel that happens. That's okay. We're not going to dock any points for a barrel. 36 million damage. Wow, that's insane. Okay. Alright. So, verdict when it comes to mobbing, overall, Flak and Moze both deal a great amount of damage, as you see. Now, side by side, you guys saw for yourselves, dealing with the same amount of enemies with the same weapons. you saw that Moze was able to directly kill more enemies a lot faster and hit a lot harder. That is because she is a character that again has more splash damage and all those things. Now coming back to the idea with survivability, I think both characters are actually quite on a fair playing field with the ability with Flak with ASC to freeze enemies on demand, or with an even better way with the immunity with the stopgap. I think Flak and Moze survivability side by side are actually quite great. Now, if we're comparing which character is better, overall, I think so far the edge is going to Moze, just on her sheer ability to handle mobs, killing them extremely fast, as you guys see in the gameplay. She does a lot better than actually Flak does, which is really just something that Moze, I think, overall is geared to do. Flak overall, I think he is a character who has a playstyle of a more stealthy character overall. He's a character who, you know, like I was saying before, he goes invisible, he's in the shadows, he can go with his fadeaway. He has his pet to distract enemies while he's shooting them, getting his critical hits, as opposed to where Moze, he's an actual just a character who just likes to explode a lot of stuff, which I think translates more into mobbing. Now, lastly, I guess we can go ahead and deal some damage to bosses. So we'll go ahead and go see Trant. Alright, so what we're going to do is side by side, we are going to be comparing Flak and Moze a little bit. But with this test, what we're going to do is we're just going to see how they fare against bosses in general. Because I also had some people talking about, you know, Flak can do more damage than Moze, or vice versa. So let's just see it in action. So we're going to use the same weapon, and also I decided to put the Bounty Hunter on Flak. We're going to use the yellow cake, and let's go ahead, and we also throw on fadeaway. So let's go ahead and do this. So throw a couple of grenades, proc that weapon damage bonus. Boom. Alright, getting some couple millions right here. Boom, let's go. Not too bad there. Pretty good stuff. Let's go over and check out Moze.
Score one for Iron Bear.
Okay then. So all in all, we saw both characters side by side, and we saw Flak, we saw Moze. They both did a lot of damage. What we noticed with Flak and Moze, very similar. Both their action skills are okay. I mean, they both have their pros and cons. They're not like amazing just yet, and I think that will change with the future patch on the release of June 4th. But we can only go with what we're working with at the moment. Now, I love the ability of Flak to be able to proc ASC amazingly quick with his racks, allowing you to spam immunity with the new anointment action skill start with your shield, such as the Frozen Heart and the Stopgap, which is great for survivability. And the Frozen Heart is a great means of a crowd control type of element. Now, also, Flak is really, really strong, of course, when it comes to dealing with critical hits, and that is one of his specialties. But one of the downfalls I find is that compared to Moze, his ability to crowd manage anyways, as opposed to control, is a little less, as we saw. Moze clearly takes out mobs a lot faster and more effectively than Flak, just based off of her build being more splash. That's just normal. And also, Flak with his pet, I find his pet also is actually not bad. His pet can actually distract enemies, and you can set up gamma burst builds and things like that, which is great for survivability. But overall, because the majority of Borderlands has to do with multiple enemies, if you look at Proving Grounds, if you look at Slaughter Shaft, all the end game content has many, many enemies surrounding the actual content itself. And Moze is just a very, very good character, more so than Flak with dealing with mobs. Now, I believe overall Flak is a character who was made to be more of a stealthy kind of character. Obviously, if you look at his skill tree, it provides some sort of invisibility with fadeaway to be unseen, to be stealthy, hit your critical hits and deal a lot of damage, get in and get out. Moze, if you look at her skill tree setup, I mean, she has ammo regeneration, she has splash damage, she has tons of fire damage and other types of weapon damage that just all sound like somebody who's going to blow up stuff and also take out crowds of enemies. And I think that's what her goal is, especially if you think just about the concept about Iron Bear being a big gunner going and gunning into actual enemy territory is kind of, I think, her premises. So I find it's normal that Moze in general is going to be better at mobbing, but keep in mind all the characters are kind of different in their own unique way and all have different play styles. So you can't kind of knock Flak for not being that kind of character, but that's just the reality of what the game is. Now, Flak overall is a great character, as you guys saw. He can still handle himself really well. He can still do a lot of damage. And again, he can really obviously kill bosses quite easily with his fadeaway build. And there's also many other builds that you can use for survivability. So I would say from a survivability perspective, both characters are quite good. But Moze, again, with the ability to deal with crowds and absolutely melt a group of enemies extremely fast, is in her favor over Flak. And that is one of the only reasons why I pick Moze over Flak in my ranking. So let me know what you guys thought in the comment section down below of what you thought about the video, if it changed any of your minds about Moze and Flak. And also, for your information, I was using the Plutonic Flak build in the video with my Flak. And for my Moze, I was using the Unholy Moze build. It's all on my YouTube channel, guys. Go check it out. I'll leave a link in the description if you guys want to check out those builds. But without further ado, I'll see you in the next video. It's your boy Scared Soldier signing out. Peace.